I remember the first night, as if it were breathing just behind my ear. The fog curled low across the campsite, thick and wet, muffling the sounds of the forest around me. Pale light from a dying lantern trembled against the trunks of ancient pines, casting shadows that seemed to lean closer with every passing second. Somewhere far away, a branch snapped, soft, deliberate, and I felt my heartbeat echo in the emptiness. The air smelled of damp earth and the faint tang of something else, something wild, alive, and watching. I tried to tell myself it was just the wind, just my mind playing tricks. But the deeper I sat in the silence, the more I noticed the shifting shapes in the fog. Eyes glimmered, then disappeared, always at the edge of vision. My companions had gone to sleep hours ago, leaving me alone with the rustling leaves and a low, distant howl that seemed almost human. I wanted to move, to run, but my legs refused. My chest tightened, as if the forest itself was holding me in place, waiting. Then the lantern flickered and died. The fog swallowed the light. In that pause, the world went still, except for one sound, breathing, slow and deliberate, right behind me. And that's when I saw it. The forest smelled of damp earth and fading leaves. A chill lingered in the air, even as the sun touched the horizon. Shadows stretched long, tangled between the trees. I walked slowly, boots sinking into soft moss. The wind moved through the branches, not like a breeze, more like a sigh. It felt as if the forest was watching, waiting. Leaves rustled behind me. Then, silence. I turned, half expecting someone to be there. Nothing, only the fog weaving between the trunks. A shape flickered at the corner of my vision, pale, almost luminous in the dying light. I blinked. It was gone. The trees leaned inward, closer than they should. Branches tapped against each other. A rhythm, almost like whispered words. I tried to focus on my steps, the crunch of twigs underfoot. But there was another sound, softer, weaving through the rustling. Soft footsteps. Behind me, or beside me. I stopped. The hum of the forest seemed louder. Breath caught in my chest. Something watched me. From the distance, beyond the trunks, I felt its eyes. Empty, pale, unblinking. It didn't move. Not yet. I moved forward again. Branches scraped my arms, leaving tiny scratches that stung like static. The wind shifted and it carried a whisper, closer. A single word, drawn out, impossible to understand. I shook my head. The forest should have been empty. Shadows flickered like candlelight. One paused, just long enough for me to feel it, considering me. Then it melted into the fog. I slowed, breathing shallow. The damp air clung to my skin. My fingers brushed against wet bark, rough, almost alive. Another glimpse, pale shape. Farther now. Waiting, watching. I didn't dare look for too long. The hush was deeper here. Every small sound, my steps, my breath, amplified against the silence. Even my heartbeat seemed loud, clanging in my ears. A gust of wind. Leaves tumbled like tiny dancers. And in the swirl, the shape appeared again. I froze. It didn't move toward me. It didn't move away. Just there, standing, watching, and then gone. I kept walking, the fog curling around my legs. The whispering followed me, soft, almost affectionate, but cold, too. I realized the forest had changed. The path I knew it felt wrong, twisting, folding back on itself. The shadows pressed closer. Branches bent as if to guide me or trap me. I could hear them sighing with each step I took. Then nothing. Only fog, thick and damp. Only the soft echo of my own breathing. I stopped completely. The pale light was gone. The shape had vanished. And the forest, it was still, waiting, patient, whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. I walked on, slowly, each step careful, tentative. The memory of those pale eyes burned in my mind. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to, because I could still feel it. Somewhere watching, always watching. The campsite smelled of damp earth and cold smoke. Mist curled along the ground, climbing over roots and rocks like ghostly fingers. The lantern trembled in the darkness, its pale light dancing across the fog. Shadows bent unnaturally in the flicker. Each movement seemed to stretch longer than it should. I felt exposed, though I was alone. The air was heavy. Every breath tasted faintly of ash and wet leaves. My fingers brushed against the rough edge of the tent, trying to anchor myself. A rustle near the fire made me tense. Soft, almost patient. Something low growl? I froze. The mist wrapped closer around my legs. Each step forward seemed muffled, swallowed by the fog. The lantern wavered again. Shadows leapt and fell. I could see shapes where there shouldn't be shapes. The smell of wet pine filled the air, sharp, almost choking. The growl came again, softer this time. Or maybe it was only the wind whispering. I crouched beside the fire, watching the fog shift. Every small movement felt amplified. A twig snapped far away, sounding like it was at my feet. A pale flicker in the distance caught my eye. I thought it was a lantern again, but it wasn't. It hovered uncertain, like a candle in a draft. I swallowed hard. The mist curled around it, reaching, stretching. I could almost feel it touch my skin. The hum of the night settled into my ears. Rustling leaves, my breath, the soft growl. Each layer made the world smaller. The fog pressing closer, thicker. I tried to steady myself. The lantern trembled, spilling pale light over twisted roots. Shadows bent toward me, then away, teasing. Another growl, soft and low. It wasn't close, but not far either. I couldn't tell if it belonged to something alive or something older. The mist rolled over my boots, icy, sticky. The smell of wet stone mingled with smoke. Every movement of the lantern cast new shapes on the fog. I leaned closer to the light, trying to see. A shadow flitted at the edge of the glow, gone before I could blink. The fog thickened, curling into shapes that didn't belong. Roots twisted like fingers across the ground. I could hear the whisper of branches stretching, bending toward me. The pale flicker returned. Closer now. I could feel its gaze, curious, patient, waiting. My chest ached with a quiet tension. Every heartbeat loud, sharp. Every breath fog in the cold air. The growl faded. The wind died down. Only the lantern trembled, spilling a pale halo over the mist. I stayed still. The forest didn't move, but I could feel it alive, patient, always watching. The flicker dimmed. Then it vanished. The mist curled and swallowed its light. I let my hands rest on my knees. The fog lingered, thick and silent. Every shadow still seemed alive. And in the quiet, I realized I was not alone. The night pressed close against the tent. Mist pulled around the edges, curling into the canvas like fingers. The fire was out, leaving only the pale flicker of a dying lantern outside. I lay in my sleeping bag, body heavy with cold and tension. Every breath sounded sharp in the stillness. The smell of damp earth seeped through the canvas, wet and raw. Then I heard it, soft, slow, footsteps circling the tent. They paused, then moved again, measured, deliberate. I held my breath. Fingers clenched into the fabric of the sleeping bag. The canvas trembled with each step. A pulse I couldn't escape. A twig snapped far away. Or maybe it was closer to the canvas. The mist pressed against the tent walls. Every shadow shifted. The air felt thicker, heavier, like it was watching me. I could hear my own heartbeat. Each thump loud, echoing in the small space. Each inhale sharp and shallow. The footsteps slowed, then stopped. Somewhere behind me, silence stretched, thick, almost expectant. A rustle at the zipper made me flinch. Cold fingers of panic crept up my spine. I didn't move. I couldn't. The steps started again, slow, patient, encircling. The canvas brushed against my shoulder. The fog outside shimmered faintly in the pale light of the lantern. Shapes twisted and folded in it, alive, teasing. I felt the floor of the tent tremble under soft weight. Was it one step? Two? A rhythm I couldn't count? The smell of wet pine sharpened, pressing against my nose. I pressed myself flat against the sleeping bag, hoping, wishing, that it would pass. But the steps continued. The zipper rustled again. A tiny shift, almost tentative. My stomach dropped. Every nerve stood at attention. The canvas bent toward me. The fog swirled outside like cold smoke. And then, just as suddenly, silence. Thick, complete. The footsteps had gone. My chest heaved in the quiet. I stayed still listening. The forest outside felt infinite, patient, alive. I could still feel them, somewhere in the fog, watching, waiting. The lantern flickered once more. Shadows danced briefly on the tent walls. Then nothing. I didn't move. I didn't breathe too loudly. I just lay there, aware of every shadow, every pause in the night. Somewhere outside the forest waited, and I was alone inside, alone with it. The moon broke through the fog, silvering the forest in soft light. Branches trembled under its glow. Mist curled over roots and stones like pale fingers. I stood still, breath shallow, listening. The cold air wrapped around my face. The smell of wet earth clung to my skin. Then it came. A howl. Close. Too close. It rolled through the trees, low and raw. I couldn't tell where it came from. Shadows twisted with every echo, bending toward me and away at once. The ground beneath me felt alive. Roots shifted beneath the pale moonlight. Fog hugged my ankles, chilling through my boots. I strained to see. Branches cracked softly under invisible weight. The silver light revealed only more shadows. Another howl, closer this time, impossibly close. My fingers brushed against the rough bark of a tree. It felt static, almost vibrating with the echo of that cry. I could taste the dampness in the air, heavy and metallic. The fog thickened. Shapes moved at the edge of my vision. I blinked. They were gone. The forest held its breath with me. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of twig, amplified. I felt exposed, naked in the silvered mist. The howl returned, stretching and bending, soft at first, then raw and urgent. The shadows answered. I didn't move. Couldn't. The earth hummed faintly under the moonlight, a vibration in my chest. My boots pressed into soft moss. Each step forward felt like breaking through a veil. The air was sharp with frost and the scent of wet pine. The howl faded into the fog. Silence settled, thick and patient. Only shadows remained, bending and twitching, alive in the pale light. I took a shallow breath. The moon shimmered on mist and leaves. I could feel eyes on me, somewhere in the shadows. I didn't turn. I didn't dare. I just waited. The forest waited, too, silent, watching. And then nothing. The forest was quiet. Fog curled low over the roots, damp and cold. The moon hovered behind clouds, silvering the edges of leaves. I walked toward a hollow in the trees. The air smelled of wet pine and moss. My boots pressed softly into the spongy earth. Then I saw them, two pale eyes, glowing from the darkness of the hollow. They blinked once, slow, calculated, and then vanished. The hollow felt alive. The mist lingered in the opening, curling like fingers. The air was thick, heavy, as though the forest itself held its breath. I froze. Every rustle of leaves, every shift of fog amplified. My own heartbeat felt loud in my chest. The eyes weren't large, but they seemed to pierce through the dark. Soft, reflective light, unblinking until the slow blink. The hollow seemed deeper than it should be. Shadows twisted inside, moving just at the edge of perception. Cold air brushed my cheeks. I stepped closer. The earth beneath me hummed faintly. The smell of damp bark and stone pressed against my nose. But the eyes didn't return. Only emptiness. The fog stretched in, swallowing the hollow. I leaned forward. The shadows inside shifted, impossible shapes folding over themselves. The silence was heavy, patient. A leaf tumbled from a branch above, landing on soft ground. The sound rang in the quiet. My fingers brushed against rough bark, static against my skin. I blinked. For a moment, I thought I saw movement. Something small, slender, watching. Then it vanished. The hollow was empty again. Only the lingering echo of those pale eyes remained. The fog swirled. Each breath I took felt thick, cold. Every sound seemed magnified. I didn't move. I couldn't. The forest waited, as if it knew I couldn't turn away. The hollow remained silent, dark, still. I exhaled slowly. The air clung to me. Every shadow seemed aware, patient, alive. And somewhere in the fog, I felt it, eyes that hadn't left, watching from a distance. always watching. The forest was still. Mist lingered low over the ground, damp and cool. The moon was hidden behind clouds, casting only pale light through the trees. Leaves trembled above me, though the air was perfectly calm. No wind, no breeze. I stopped, every nerve stretched tight. The smell of wet bark and moss hung heavy in the air. Something moved, silent, graceful, slipping between shadows with ease. I could feel it watching, each step measured, deliberate, but soundless. The hum of the forest pressed against my chest. A branch quivered above my head. The leaves rattled softly. A faint exhale, barely perceptible, brushed past my ear. I crouched low, pressing my hands to the cold earth. The dirt smelled of decay and frost. The fog curled around my boots, wet and soft. Every rustle felt magnified. Every snap of twig was sharp and immediate. I could sense its movement, though I could not see it. Shadows stretched and folded around me. Something slipped behind a trunk, then paused as if considering me. I held my breath. Fingers pressed into moss, damp and rough. The air hummed faintly, vibrating with anticipation. Another movement, closer, silent. I tilted my head. A pale shimmer between the branches. It vanished before I could focus. The forest was alive with its presence. Leaves stirred without wind. Mist curled higher, brushing my cheeks like cold fingers. I felt its breath. Soft, fleeting, close enough to raise goose flesh. No eyes met mine, yet I could sense it, patient, waiting, aware. The branches above shifted again, rustling, twitching, trembling. The fog thickened, curling into shapes that didn't belong. I did not move, could not move. Even the forest seemed to pause, holding its breath with me. Then silence, thick, patient, endless. Only the lingering chill of its presence remained. I exhaled slowly. The damp earth pressed under my palms. The shadows shifted, but the movement was gone. I remained still, listening to nothing, feeling everything. The forest waited, always waiting, and I was alone with it. The forest opened into something unfamiliar. Mist hung heavy over twisted roots and tangled undergrowth. The moon barely reached through the branches, casting pale light over damp earth. I stumbled on an old path, overgrown, almost hidden by moss and weeds. It felt forgotten. The scent of wet soil and decaying leaves was strong. Each step pressed into soft mud, cold and sticky against my boots. The forest seemed to hum beneath me, patient and expectant. Footprints appeared, large, too deliberate to be mine. They pressed deep into the mud, each one heavy and precise. I froze. My own breathing seemed loud, shallow. The fog curled around my legs like fingers trying to hold me. I leaned closer to inspect them. The mud smelled earthy, raw, clinging to my skin. Each print shimmered faintly in the pale light. The path stretched forward, disappearing into shadow. Roots twisted over it, as if trying to swallow it whole. The air felt thicker here, heavy with anticipation. I felt eyes on me, not just watching, but aware of every movement. The footprints, they hadn't moved, yet the forest whispered they might. A branch quivered above. Leaves trembled though the air was still. A faint rustle in the distance echoed like soft footsteps. I took a hesitant step. The mud squished beneath my boots. Another footprint appeared, impossibly close. I swallowed hard. The fog curled higher, brushing against my cheeks. Cold air pressed into my lungs. The path seemed endless. Shadows folded over themselves. The forest hummed, patient, alive. I traced the prints forward, curiosity tinged with fear. Each step brought a subtle shift in the mist. Shapes twisted at the edges of my vision, teasing, hiding. The air grew colder. A faint metallic scent lingered, sharp and strange. The footprints never left the path, yet I felt something moving behind me. I stopped. The forest held its breath. Every twig, every leaf, amplified in the silence. The prints ended abruptly. Mud pressed smooth. Nothing moved. I stood alone on the forgotten trail. The fog curled around my ankles. The forest watched, and I realized I was not truly alone. The forest was thick with fog. Moist air pressed against my skin, cold and heavy. Leaves dripped with dew, brushing softly against my arms. Then I saw it, A pale glow, hovering between the trunks. It moved unnaturally, flickering and darting like it had its own life. I stepped closer. The damp earth smelled sharp, of moss and decay. My boots sank into soft mud, cold creeping through my soles. The light shifted again, a shimmer between shadows, impossible to catch. It retreated when I followed, teasing alive. Branches twisted overhead. The fog curled around them, brushing my face. Every breath I took felt thick and metallic. I tried to keep calm. The forest hummed faintly, almost vibrating beneath me. Each rustle, each snap of twig, made my chest tighten. The pale glow danced again, twisting between trunks, retreating just beyond reach. I reached forward, hand trembling, but it vanished. The shadows seemed longer now. The fog thickened, curling around my legs. The air tasted damp, heavy with anticipation. I followed, careful, breath shallow. Every step pressed into cold, wet soil. The forest seemed to bend, almost guiding me. The light flickered again, closer this time, and yet still out of reach. I felt something brush past my shoulder. Soft, silent. The forest held its breath with me. The glow paused, pale, almost human in its shimmer, then darted away, retreating deeper into the fog. I stopped, my heart hammered. Every nerve thrummed in my skin. The forest was alive, waiting, watching. The glow lingered, faint and teasing beyond sight. I exhaled slowly. Fog curled around my boots and ankles. Shadows twisted at the edge of the trees, alive with unseen presence. I didn't move. I couldn't. The pale glow waited, just beyond reach. And in the silence, I realized I was not alone. The forest was silent. Mist drifted low over the ground, curling around roots and stones. Moonlight shimmered faintly, casting pale silver across wet leaves. Then I heard it, a growl, distant at first. Deep, low, vibrating through the fog. It shifted in pitch, almost like laughter, but hollow, empty. I froze. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of twig felt louder. The forest seemed to hold its breath with me. I strained to see through the fog. Shadows twisted between trunks, bending and folding in impossible ways. The damp air pressed cold against my face. The growl came again, closer this time, curving, stretching, almost playful, but not kind. I could feel something moving behind the fog, soft, deliberate, not stepping on twigs, but pressing against the earth in silent weight. My fingers brushed damp moss on a nearby trunk. The bark felt static, vibrating faintly under my touch. The smell of wet pine and mud pressed into my senses. Another shift in the growl. It warped, bending as though aware of me. I wasn't alone. The fog swirled around my boots. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me. Branches twitched, though the wind was still. I held my breath. The forest hummed faintly. The growl faded slightly, leaving a strange, lingering echo. I exhaled slowly. The mist curled higher, brushing my cheeks. The shadows remained patient, waiting. The laughter growl returned, soft, distant, yet close enough to make my chest tighten. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every nerve thrummed in my skin. The fog thickened. The forest pressed in, alive with unseen eyes. I realized, whatever it was, it had been watching all along. The growl faded again. Only silence remained, thick, heavy, full of anticipation. I stayed still. The fog swirled, and I knew with a quiet certainty I was not alone. The forest pressed close around me. Mist curled low over roots and rocks, damp and cold. Branches trembled overhead, though the air was still. I paused to rest, knees pressed into soft earth, breath shallow, heart hammering. Then it came, a sharp exhale. Close, too close. I spun. The fog swirled, silvered by pale moonlight. Branches quivered. Shadows stretched. Nothing. Only the trembling forest. Only the fog curling at my ankles. My skin prickled. Goose flesh raised where the air brushed cold against my neck. The earth smelled of wet moss and pine, thick and raw. I listened. Every leaf, every twig, every soft rustle echoed in the silence. The forest seemed to hum beneath me. Another exhale, so faint I could barely feel it on my cheek, yet unmistakable. I could sense movement behind the fog. Silent, patient, watching. The branches above swayed, though no wind stirred them. The mist wrapped tighter around my legs. Every shadow seemed to fold closer, leaning in. I pressed my hands into the cold earth. The soil felt alive beneath my fingers. Static prickled along my arms, like the air itself was charged. The exhale came again, brief, sharp, then nothing. I stayed still, listening to my own heartbeat, loud in the quiet. Every breath mingled with the damp, metallic scent of the forest. The fog thickened. Shapes twisted at the edges of vision. I could feel the eyes behind me, patient, aware, waiting. I didn't move. I couldn't. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath with me. The exhale had vanished. Only the trembling forest remained, the mist curling, the shadows folding. I exhaled slowly. The air was heavy, cold, alive, and I realized I was not alone. The forest was thick with fog. Moonlight barely pierced the mist, silvering leaves and wet bark. Every step pressed into damp earth, cold and yielding beneath my boots. Shadows moved, sliding across the fog, purposeful, deliberate. They weren't random, not natural. I stopped. The air smelled of wet pine and cold stone. Every rustle, every sigh of leaves pressed against my senses. Trees seemed to lean closer, roots twisted like fingers reaching. Branches hovered overhead, brushing against the fog. My heartbeat hammered in my chest. Every nerve screamed to leave, but my feet remained planted. The shadows shifted again, longer now, folding over themselves. The fog clung to them, soft and cold, brushing my legs. I could hear faint movement behind me, soft, deliberate, like something pacing, patient, waiting. The forest hummed faintly beneath the fog. Each rustle, each snap of twig amplified in the silence. I swallowed hard, tasting damp earth and metallic cold. A shadow slipped along a trunk. Pause. Then another shifted closer, almost gliding. I held my breath. The trees seemed to bend inward, drawing me into their folds. Every step forward felt heavier, resisted by the thick, clinging mist. Shadows twisted with the fog. The air hummed faintly, vibrating in my chest. Something was watching, aware, patient. I pressed my hands against damp moss. Rough, cold, grounding me. Yet I could feel the forest leaning, alive, waiting. The fog thickened. Shadows stretched and collapsed at the edges of vision. Every sense screamed to leave. I did not move. I could not move. Even the forest seemed to hold its breath with me. The shadows shifted one last time, gliding past, silent, purposeful. Then the fog swallowed them. I exhaled slowly. The earth pressed damp beneath my palms. The trees leaned back and the forest waited. And I realized I was not alone. The forest thinned, fog curling low over roots and fallen leaves. Moonlight shimmered weakly, silvering damp earth. Branches trembled faintly, brushing against the mist. I stepped into a clearing. Old camping gear lay scattered, broken, and weathered. Rusty cans, a torn tent flap, a faded sleeping bag pressed into moss. The air smelled sharp, iron and earth. Cold, damp, thick. Every breath carried it deeper into my lungs. Something shifted at the edge of the clearing. A shadow moved between trunks, deliberate, patient. I couldn't see clearly, only sense it. I crouched low, pressing hands into wet moss. The rough texture grounded me, but the forest hummed beneath the fog. A faint rustle echoed, almost like soft footsteps pacing the tree-line. The old gear caught pale moonlight. Scratches and tears marked it, silent witnesses. The air vibrated with something unseen, alive. I stepped closer. Mud squished softly under my boots. The smell of wet earth and iron pressed stronger. The shadow lingered, eyes unseen watching from the trees. The forest held its breath with me. I could feel the fog wrap around my ankles. Each leaf brushing my arms felt deliberate. Every sense screamed the same warning. The clearing felt wrong, familiar in a strange way. Time seemed to pause between the trees, between breaths. I leaned toward the broken tent flap. The fabric was damp, clinging. A subtle hum vibrated through the moss, faint and insistent. Movement flickered at the tree-lean. The shadow didn't advance, only observed. Silence stretched, heavy, expectant. I pressed my palms into cold earth. The forest seemed to tilt, leaning in, alive. The smell of iron thickened, sharp in the mist. I didn't move. I couldn't. Every shadow, every shiver of leaves, was aware of me. The fog curled higher. Branches twisted toward the clearing, and the shadow lingered, patient, just beyond sight. I exhaled slowly. The clearing held its secrets, still and waiting, and I realized I was not alone. The fog hung low. Branches dripped with dew, cold and heavy against my skin. The moon barely pierced the mist, silvering the forest floor. Lanterns hung from the branches, rusted, swinging slowly. Though the air was still, I reached out. The metal was cold, biting against my fingers. A faint hum vibrated through the mist, faint and insistent. Shadows around the lanterns twitched, not random, deliberate. They folded and stretched, bending over themselves in the fog. The scent of damp iron mixed with wet pine. Each breath carried it deeper, sharp against my lungs. Every nerve tightened, alive with unease. I touched another lantern. The cold pressed into my palm. Fog curled higher, brushing against my ankles. Movement flickered between the trees. The shadows weren't still. They watched, patient, deliberate. The lanterns swayed again. Soft, slow, unnatural. Light trembled across twisted roots and wet moss. I stepped closer. Mud pressed cold against my boots. Branches scraped faintly against my arms, teasing the skin. The shadows twisted around the lanterns, stretching, folding, leaning. The fog wrapped them close, alive, breathing. I didn't move. Couldn't. Even the forest seemed to pause, holding its breath with me. A faint metallic scent lingered. Rusted metal, wet earth, damp moss. Every sense screamed quiet warning. The lanterns glimmered, swaying. Shadows twitched at their edges. The forest waited, patient, alive. I exhaled slowly. The mist pressed around me, and I realized I was not alone. The night was quiet. Stars pierced the fog and scattered, pale points. The forest hummed faintly beneath the mist. Then I heard it, soft whispers drifting through the trees, faint, fragile, like silk brushing skin. I stopped. Every leaf, every twig, seemed magnified in the silence. The cold pressed against my cheeks, damp and sharp. The whispers grew clearer, shapes of words, names. My name, drawn out, twisted in the mist. I strained to see. Branches swayed without wind. Fog curled around trunks, thick and cold. The scent of wet pine and damp moss filled my lungs. My hands brushed against rough bark, grounding me. The forest felt alive, aware, listening. The whispers shifted, closer, weaving through the fog. Impossible to trace, yet intimate, deliberate. I pressed my palms into the cold earth. Fingers sank into moss, soft and wet. Every rustle of leaves echoed like soft footsteps. Shadows folded in the fog. They lingered at the edges of vision, patient, observing. The stars above flickered behind the haze. I breathed slowly. The whispers circled, wrapping around me, intimate and alien. Every nerve hummed, every hair raised. The fog thickened. The shadows seemed to lean closer. The forest waited, patient, alive. I did not move, could not move. Even the mist seemed to hold its breath with me. The whispers softened, fading into the rustle of leaves. The stars glimmered faintly through the fog, and I realized I was alone, yet not alone. The fog was thick, curling low around roots and stones. Moonlight barely pierced the mist, silvering wet leaves. The forest pressed close, alive and patient. Then I heard it, branches snapping. A rhythm, steady, deliberate. I paused. Cold air pressed against my cheeks, damp and sharp. Every leaf, every twig, seemed amplified in the silence. I began to follow. Each snap drew me deeper. Mud pressed cold beneath my boots. The forest shifted around me. Trunks bent subtly, roots twisting beneath the fog. The path I thought I knew slipped, unseen. Branches snapped again. Soft, sharp, echoing faintly, guiding, mocking. The mist curled higher, brushing my ankles. The smell of wet pine and moss thickened. Every inhale carried damp earth, iron and cold. The air hummed faintly, vibrating through my chest. Shadows twisted in the fog, long, folding, deliberate. They hover at the edges of vision, patient, aware. I press my hands into damp moss. Rough, cold, grounding me, yet the forest shifted subtly, almost alive, around each step. The snaps continued, soft, rhythmic, each one pulling me forward, deeper into uncertainty. Fog wrapped my legs. Branches scraped against my arms. The forest seemed to lean inward, watching, waiting. I stopped. Every sense screamed warning. Yet curiosity drew me onward, reluctant, trembling. The rhythm of snaps changed. Closer now, yet I could not locate its source. I exhaled slowly. Mist clung to my face, damp and heavy. Shadows lingered, patient, deliberate. The forest held its breath. I could feel it leaning, alive, waiting, and I realized I was not alone. Fog clung low to the forest floor. Moonlight shimmered pale and weak through the branches. Every leaf trembled in the stillness, each shadow thick with expectation. Then it began, a low hum, vibrating through the mist, alive, almost breathing. I stopped. Cold air pressed against my skin. Every nerve prickled, tense and alert. The hum pulsed softly, like something beneath the ground, or hovering just beyond sight. The smell of damp moss and wet earth thickened. Each breath carried it deep into my lungs. The mist wrapped around my ankles, cold and clinging. I stepped forward, feet pressed into soft mud, pulling slightly with each step. Branches brushed my arms, faintly teasing. The hum shifted, closer, resonating through chest and bones. Shadows folded in the fog, long, patient, deliberate. They moved without sound, gliding just beyond vision. I pressed my hands into cold moss, rough, damp, grounding me. Yet the hum pulsed through, persistent, hypnotic. Fog swirled around my legs. Every leaf, every branch seemed magnified in the silence. The forest was alive, waiting, listening. The hum grew softer, then deeper, vibrating through the air, through the fog, through me, impossible to locate, yet impossible to ignore. I held my breath. The forest leaned inward, silent, expectant. The mist wrapped tighter, wet and cold. I could feel every heartbeat. Every nerve screamed, yet curiosity pulled me onward. The hum, soft and alive, guided me. I exhaled slowly. The fog pressed against my face, damp and heavy. Shadows lingered, patient, deliberate, and I realized I was not alone. Fog drifted thick among the trees. Moonlight shimmered weakly, pale and distant. The air smelled damp, cold, heavy with moss. Then I saw them, figures at the edge of the fog, pale, shifting, almost like smoke. I blinked. They vanished. The mist swallowed them completely. The ground pressed cold beneath my boots. Leaves whispered softly as I stepped. Branches brushed against my arms, faint and teasing. I held my breath. A chill ran through my spine, slow and deliberate. The fog swirled around my legs, dense and pressing. The figures returned, flickering at the edges. Not still, not moving like ordinary beings. They bent, twisted, shifting in impossible ways. I could feel their presence more than see it. A hum of cold air, a faint vibration beneath my feet. The forest held its silence with me, tense and waiting. I reached out, hand trembling. Mist brushed my fingers, wet and cold. The figures recoiled, then reformed, flickering again. The smell of damp earth and rotting leaves pressed closer. Every breath carried it deep into my lungs. Every sense screamed, yet I could not look away. The forest seemed alive around them. Shadows bent toward the figures. Light trembled across trunks and roots, pale and shifting. I stepped forward slowly. Mud clung to my boots, sucking faintly. The figures wavered, teasing, impossible to touch. The wind held still. Only the faint rustle of leaves, barely audible, accompanied me. The flickering shapes lingered, patient, deliberate. I exhaled slowly. The fog wrapped tighter, damp and cold. The figures faded again, leaving only the forest, breathing and alive. And I realized I was alone, yet not alone. Fog draped the forest floor. Moonlight glimmered pale across wet rocks. The stream whispered softly, moving over moss stones. Then I saw them, eyes reflecting the moonlight. Pale, sharp, unnaturally bright. They moved too fast, sliding across the water like liquid shadows. Every ripple trembled under their gaze. I stepped closer. Mud clung cold to my boots. Mist brushed my face, damp and heavy. A sense of presence pressed beneath the surface. Something waiting, patient, deliberate. The water held its breath with me. The smell of wet earth and damp leaves thickened. Each inhale pulled it deep into my lungs. The stream shivered, though no wind stirred. The eyes shifted again. Faster, darting beneath the surface. Ripples stretched unnaturally, distorting reflections. I crouched near the edge. Fingers brushed cold stones, grounding me. The forest seemed to lean closer, shadows folding in. Every sense screamed caution, yet I could not look away. The eyes pulsed, hypnotic, alive. The stream murmured softly. Ripples slid outward, brushing my boots. I could feel something just below, waiting unseen. The moon reflected on the water, pale and trembling. Shadows flickered across the bank. Every breath drew damp air deeper into my chest. I exhaled slowly. The mist wrapped tighter, wet and heavy. The eyes vanished, leaving only the stream, trembling and alive. And I realized I was alone, yet not alone. Fog clung to the undergrowth, thick and damp. Branches pressed against my shoulders, wet with dew. The forest breathed slowly, heavy and silent. Then I saw it, a shallow cave, hidden behind twisted vines and brambles. Dark, yawning, and still. I stepped closer. Mud sucked at my boots. Mist brushed my face, cold and clinging. Inside, bones lay scattered. Old, gnawed, bleached pale in the faint moonlight. The smell of earth and decay pressed heavy in the air. I crouched at the entrance. Fingers touched rough stone, damp and cold. The fog wrapped tighter, soft and pressing. Shadows twisted across the walls of the cave. Every movement felt deliberate, alive. The air thrummed faintly, like breath held too long. The bones gleamed faintly, pale against dark stone. Each one seemed to watch, silent and patient. The smell of iron and earth grew sharper, metallic and damp. I exhaled slowly. The cave seemed to breathe with me, echoing each sound. Soft rustling from deeper inside made my heart jump. I could feel eyes, though none were visible. A presence, patient, deliberate, waiting. Every sense screamed caution. The wind held still outside. Only the faint hum of the forest accompanied me. Mist curled through the entrance, damp and cold. I stepped back slowly. Mud clung to my boots, pulling faintly. The cave waited silently, bones scattered, watching. And I realized I was alone, yet not alone. Fog hugged the forest floor. Branches pressed close, wet with dew. The air smelled of damp earth and moss. Then it began, rustling, soft at first, everywhere around me. Movement from left, right, behind, circling. I froze, heart pounding, breath shallow, damp air in my lungs. Every sense screamed, yet I stayed silent. Leaves trembled above. Branches whispered faintly as if warning. The fog twisted around my legs, cold and thick. The rustling drew closer. Soft, deliberate, patient. Each step echoed in the hush, though no footfall could be seen. I tried to ground myself. Fingers touched rough bark, cold and damp. The mist pressed against my face, heavy and wet. Shadows slid along the trees. They bent, twisting toward the sound. The forest itself seemed alive, attentive, waiting. Every rustle teased me. A brush of air like passing breath. A faint vibration beneath my feet, subtle and alive. The hum of the woods grew sharper. Every leaf, every branch, seemed to pulse with unseen movement. I could smell iron and wet earth, thick and metallic. I exhaled slowly. The fog wrapped tighter, soft and suffocating. The rustling stopped, then moved again, closer, deliberate. Silence fell suddenly. I held my breath, frozen in damp shadows. The forest waited, patient, unseen, surrounding me, and I realized I was alone, yet not alone. Mist draped the forest like a curtain. Each step pressed soft into damp earth. Branches glistened with dew, brushing my cheeks. Then they appeared, pale hands, reaching through the fog. They hovered, fragile, unnatural. I froze, heart thudding in quiet panic. The mist wrapped around me, cold and dense. I reached forward, fingers brushing air thick with moisture. The hands retreated instantly, vanishing into white haze. The forest exhaled slowly. Rustling leaves whispered against unseen branches. I could smell damp earth, iron faint in the mist. I stepped closer. Mist parted, revealing fleeting glimpses. Hands, pale and silent, moving with purpose, then gone. Shadowed forms danced at the edges of my vision. The fog pressed into my clothes, wet and chilling. Every step forward felt heavier, each breath louder. Silence fell, thick and watchful, yet the sense of being surrounded lingered. I was alone, yet every nerve screamed otherwise. A shiver passed through my skin. The forest seemed to lean in, patient, curious. I could almost hear the soft exhale of the unseen. The hands returned, briefly, pale against gray mist, then vanished again, leaving only cold air and trembling leaves. The fog wrapped tighter, quiet, unyielding. I stepped back, heart hammering, breath shallow, and in that silence I realized I was caught between the seen and the unseen, alone yet surrounded, watching and being watched. Fog pressed against my skin, damp and heavy. The forest lay quiet, too quiet. Branches hung like dark arms, motionless. Then it came, a howl, distant at first, shaking the air, carried on a wind that didn't exist. I froze. Every nerve thrummed with unease. The sound circled, folding around me. Leaves whispered above, trembling despite still air. The ground smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic. Breath quickened, heart hammering. I tried to locate it. Every direction, the same echo. Close, far, everywhere, and nowhere. A low hum underlined the howl, subtle, vibrating through the fog. I felt it against my chest, inside my bones. The mist clung to my hair, wet and cold. Shadows moved just at the edge of vision. I swore they paused when I blinked, then shifted again, teasing, silent. I whispered my own name. The howl answered, higher now, sharper, closer, yet still I saw nothing. Rustling twigs, soft footsteps that weren't mine. I spun slowly, heart rising. Every movement felt trapped in a thick, wet air. The howl wrapped around me, folding into the fog. My breath became shallow, visible in pale light. The forest seemed to lean in, patient, waiting. I stepped forward. Mist swallowed my feet, cool and sticky. Each step echoed faintly, a whisper against a larger sound. And then silence, momentary, brittle. I listened. The howl returned, louder, closer, wrapping like fingers around my mind. I wanted to call out, but my throat locked, dry, useless. Alone, utterly alone, yet not. The mist pressed harder. Shadows twitched, fleeting shapes among gray trunks. My skin prickled, sweat and cold mingling. I tried to follow the sound, to run, to hide. The forest twisted subtly beneath my eyes. Paths I thought familiar shifted, unfamiliar, impossible. The howl faded slowly, leaving a hollow ache in the chest. The fog hung thick. The forest smelled of wet earth, decaying leaves and fear. I sank to my knees, breath shaking, every sense screaming, warning, waiting. And I realized I was not safe. Not anywhere. Not in this forest, not in the fog, not alone. Only silence remained, pale light filtering through clouds above. The howl had retreated for now. Fog clung to the forest floor, damp and heavy. Twilight pressed through branches, pale and quiet. The air smelled faintly of smoke and earth, mingled with decay. I stumbled upon it, a circle of cold ashes. The remnants of a fire, long dead, ashes arranged strangely. They formed shapes like footprints, leading nowhere. I crouched. Fingers brushed the gray, soft and powdery. The smell of burnt wood lingered, stale and hollow. The forest seemed to breathe around me. Leaves quivered, though no wind moved. A hum of life, or something else, threaded through the silence. I traced the footprints with my eyes. They twisted between tree roots, then vanished beneath thick moss. Shadows shifted at the edge of my vision. Every branch and trunk seemed alive, curving, leaning, as if observing. The air grew colder. Fingers of fog wrapped my legs. Each inhalation carried a whisper of iron, smoke, and something faintly sweet. I stood slowly. The forest pressed closer. Branches arched over, skeletal fingers framing the ashes. I thought I heard footsteps, soft and deliberate. Pause. Then another, always circling, never approaching, never leaving. The footprints in the ashes, they felt impossibly deliberate. The imprint of someone or something that had been here, yet now was gone. A faint rustle. A shadow drifted between trees. I blinked. It disappeared. I crouched again. Fingers hovered over the ashes. Cold pressed into my skin. A reminder that nothing here belonged to the living. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. The fog moved like breath. The forest exhaled around me, patient, waiting. I imagined a presence behind the trees, just beyond sight. Curious, aware, watching. The footprints teased a path through the mist, leading nowhere I could see, leading somewhere I did not wish to follow. I rose, shivering, every sense on edge. The ash, the fog, the forest. Everything was alive with quiet anticipation. A single leaf drifted down. It landed on the ashes. The imprint of the fire, frozen, unmoving. I stepped back. The forest seemed to pulse. The shadows of branches stretched longer, bending toward me. I did not touch the footprints again. I could feel the eyes, unseen, tracing my movements. The cold lingered on my skin, deep into my bones. Finally I turned. The mist swallowed my path behind me. The ashes lay undisturbed, footprints leading nowhere, and the forest breathed around me, patient and waiting. Fog hung low between the trees. The air was thick, damp against my skin. Even my breath felt heavy, swallowed by the mist. I noticed them first as faint glimmers. Pairs of eyes, pale and steady, reflecting the weak moonlight. They blinked once, deliberately, and then stared again. Each blink felt like a warning, a quiet demand to stay where I was, or perhaps to leave. I could feel the weight of them, pressing through the fog. The forest was silent around me. Leaves shivered though the wind was absent. Every twig, every rustle, seemed amplified. I moved slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet. The eyes shifted with me, gliding between shadows, pairs and pairs, forming and vanishing like smoke. The mist swirled around my legs, wet and cool. I could smell the damp earth, the faint decay of fallen leaves. Something faintly sweet lingered beneath it, almost imperceptible. I blinked, and the eyes were closer. Or maybe I had moved too near. I couldn't tell where I ended, and the fog began. A soft hum rose through the silence. Not loud, not insistent, just vibrating through the damp air. My skin prickled. Every hair felt aware of their presence. I tried to turn, to step away, but the forest seemed to stretch, bending paths I had known. Shadows twisted, trees leaned, and the eyes remained. Each pair stared without expression, watching, waiting, patient. I imagined they could see my pulse, my every breath. The fog thickened, clinging to my face, brushing my cheeks. The eyes flickered, not in fear, but in quiet acknowledgement, like they were marking time, letting me know I was observed. I heard the faintest rustle behind me. I froze, listening. Nothing moved but the fog. I took a cautious step forward. The eyes shifted as if to follow my motion. The air felt heavier, almost tangible, pressing on my chest. I stopped again, unsure. Each blink from them was like a signal, a pulse in the silence. I realized I could not see the ground beneath me clearly. The fog swallowed roots and rocks, hiding everything. The eyes floated in the haze, detached, otherworldly. I breathed slowly, trying to steady the rising tension. Every sound, every shadow, became sharper in my mind. The pairs of eyes multiplied, retreating and advancing with my gaze. I imagined the forest watching, too, Not just the eyes, but the trees, the fog, the earth itself, silent witnesses to my presence. Quietly judging, I turned, moving with measured steps. The pairs blinked again, unblinking at the same moment. It felt like a warning I could not ignore, yet could not understand. The mist clung to my shoulders, cold and heavy. I could feel the dampness soaking through my clothes. Every breath, every heartbeat, seemed amplified against the silence. I paused. The eyes were everywhere, yet nowhere specific. Watching, waiting, patient in the fog. Slowly I edged away. Each step was careful, deliberate. The pairs of eyes did not follow closely, but lingered at the edge of perception. The fog softened as I moved. Their presence remained distant but insistent, a quiet reminder that I was not alone. I exhaled, long and measured. The forest seemed to settle around me. The eyes faded gradually. Blinking one last time, I walked onward, the mist brushing my skin. The pairs of eyes remained in memory, silent sentinels in the fog. And I knew, somewhere just beyond sight, they waited. Darkness pressed in from all sides. The forest swallowed the last traces of light. Every shadow stretched and bent, heavy and alive. I could feel the dampness in the air, thick and clinging. The earth smelled of rot and rain, faintly metallic under my nose. Even the fog seemed to hold its breath with me. Shapes moved just beyond my sight, silent, deliberate, gliding through the gloom. Sometimes they paused, then continued as though aware of my gaze. I tried to see them clearly, but the more I looked, the less certain my eyes became. The fog wove around the shapes, soft and shifting. A branch cracked somewhere far off. I didn't startle. I had learned to listen without flinching. My skin prickled. Something watched from the depths of shadow. Not hidden, not hiding, simply present. I took a slow step forward. The shapes moved in unison with me, yet apart. I could feel their presence in my chest, like a faint hum vibrating through the air. The forest had a pulse now, a rhythm to the rustling leaves, the distant drip of water, the subtle creak of ancient trees. I felt part of it, part of the space between fog and shadow. The air was cold, but not biting. It wrapped around me, brushing my hair and clothes. I inhaled slowly, tasting damp moss and earth, grounded myself in the silence. Shapes shifted closer, yet never fully revealed. I realized I no longer feared them. Their silent grace was neither threatening nor kind, simply inevitable. I reached toward a passing shadow. It flickered, barely touching my fingers, before drifting away. The mist seemed to follow it, curling in patterns I could almost understand. I stopped moving. The world was quiet, except for my own slow heartbeat. Even the fog seemed to pause, hovering just beyond sensation. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The forest, the shadows, the shapes, they all existed in harmony. And I belonged. Breath shallow, I walked further into the darkness. The shadows bent around me, not blocking but guiding. Every step felt like acknowledgement, a quiet acceptance of this hidden world. A pale light flickered somewhere between the trees. Not bright, just enough to remind me of edges and space. The shapes danced through it, moving in ways that were both beautiful and impossible. I stopped again. The fog wrapped my shoulders like a blanket, cool and soft. I could feel the shapes circling, gliding, patient in their silent ritual. Time slowed. I had no idea how long I had been here. Minutes, hours, perhaps days. It no longer mattered. The forest exhaled with me, a hum of earth and decay and life. I felt it enter my bones, steady and grounding. I realized then that I would not leave. I would not need to. I had become part of the quiet world beneath the fog and shadow. The shapes paused, watching me with their silent grace. I returned their attention with a steady breath. No fear, no resistance, only recognition. The mist curled around my ankles. The shadows stretched, touching the fog like fingers. I walked forward, slowly, deliberately, and they moved with me. Alone, yet not alone. The forest had swallowed the light, but it had not swallowed me. I was here, part of the rhythm, part of the watching, part of the stillness. The fog shifted, soft and eternal. I could feel the shapes glide past, brushing my skin with quiet acknowledgement. And I accepted it. This world, This silence, this isolation. I was not afraid anymore. I was part of the forest now, alone among shadows, yet strangely at home.